Bob Pitulej, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate being on, and thanks for doing this for our class.
No, it's my pleasure. It's great having you on. Where are you in the world now? I did cheat and looked at your LinkedIn, so I kind of know where you are. But let folks know where you're at.
Yeah, so my wife and I have been living in Reston, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. since 1996.
Okay, and you've had a very interesting career. Where I think you're leading the way in terms of some of the great experiences you have done. And so, what do you do now? Let me talk a little bit about your circumstances there in
Yeah,
Reston.
yeah, sure. So,
You
exciting time for us. My wife and I just decided to retire. So, my wife, who worked for Fannie Mae for a number of years, retired on May 1st. And then myself, I had retired from federal service in 2024. And then, like 2 days later, had started working in the private sector. So, I've been working for the Dollar Tree and Family Dollar companies. And so I
Mhm.
just decided to retire. May 15th was my last day. So both of us are saying
Ah,
that's it for full-time work. We'll see about part-time and projects and things, but so we're both officially retired now. And the other part of the news is we're moving to. We had built a second home in Leland, North Carolina, outside of Wilmington, North Carolina. So May
okay.
28th, we're heading out after 30 years of living in the Washington D.C. area. We're heading down to Leland, North Carolina, outside of Wilmington to relax and enjoy retirement there.
Congratulations. Well
Thanks.
done.
Appreciate it.
You can
Appreciate
you
it.
can join the rest of us in uh, it's actually not so leisurely, but a nice retirement because we end up creating lots of projects. That's great. So Wilmington's just up the road from where I'm at, so hopefully we get together some.
Yeah. We're about an hour north of Myrtle Beach area.
Yeah, that's great. Good for you. That's super. And what made that area of the world interesting to retire to?
It was funny, Paul, when, like you kind of go through life phases. When I turned 50, like I never thought about, we graduate and we think, everybody's Captain America and we're going to, conquer the world and all that stuff and save the world. I never thought about retirement or anything. And then
Right.
age 50 hit and just started thinking about, maybe start planning a little bit for retirement about a dozen years ago. So my wife and I took one of those trips. There's this online magazine called Ideal Living. So we
Yeah.
started exploring some communities and stuff. And the first one, we said, we shook hands before we went, and we said, look, we're just going down to visit. We're not going to buy anything. So we went down to the Wilmington, North Carolina area, and fell in love with this community called Compass Point outside of Leland,
Yeah.
and spent the day driving around looking at it and stuff. And we said, you know what, we'll go ahead and buy an investment property here. So we love the area, 20 minutes, 25 minutes from the beaches, yet we're inland far enough to not necessarily be right in the hurricane pathway stuff. So we had
Yeah.
we had the land for a couple years, and then we said, you know what, let's build a home. So it was kind of a step-by-step process once we hit our 50s.
Good for you. That's great.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area up there. I think you're
Yeah.
going to enjoy it for sure. The Washington D.C. and Virginia, Northern Virginia area where you are now, a great concentration of classmates. But then
Yep.
the Carolinas is the is the fallback position. So
There
I
you
think
go.
you're going to find a lot of good opportunities. And did the job have you traveling a lot?
Yeah, the last job I had, the Dollar Tree Family Dollar companies are a retail store. It kind of focuses on economic disadvantaged folks as far as the volume. It was a big company. It was Dollar Tree and Family Dollar together. There were about 17,000 stores across the country. We had 26 warehouses across the country, and I was responsible for the environmental health and safety programs and
Mhm.
compliance for the company. And as you can imagine, we had quite a few challenges and stuff. So did travel quite a bit. We had some warehouses in Odessa, Texas, and trying to think of some of the other from Joliet, Illinois, Front Royal, Virginia. So had a chance to travel to some of those places. I'd say probably a week or two out of the month, I was probably on the road a little bit, little less toward the end and stuff. Because around 2025, our two companies split. So now it was Dollar Tree and Family Dollar, and I stayed with the Dollar Tree side and stuff. So, but it
Now,
was some travel. Yep.
just to bring some context to it, there were 16,000 stores you said in your profile, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
you were over a. There was a lot of environmental health and safety to look after.
There was like 200,000 associates in the company, and
Right.
the company has it's not exactly a high paying job, so you had a lot of turnover. So constant,
Yeah.
it felt it was funny because part of the program I brought to it was sort of a military basic training approach. We were constantly churning out new staff coming on board. So it seems like we were always putting new people through the basic training of the safety programs and
Yeah.
things like that for the
Yeah.
company.
Yeah. Because that kind of safety is very, very fundamental.
Yeah.
And then just what got you into that line of work? Because you worked for OSHA was your
Yeah.
first job, or just
Yeah.
what brought you there? What brought you to
Yeah.
that area? It's
Yeah, it was
fascinating.
kind of it was an unusual path. So, after getting out from active duty, I was on for about 5.5 years, and then went to a couple schools. And then the last school I went to, I applied to this program called the U.S. Presidential Management Internship Program. Now they call it the U.S. Presidential Management Fellows Program. Try to make it a little fancier. But anyway, so I applied for that and got accepted, got nominated by my school, my graduate school, and they had kind of a cattle call in Washington, D.C. This is in 1996. So we came down here. At that time, wasn't my wife yet. She was my fiance. We came down to visit. We said Washington, D.C. We're both from New Jersey originally. So we said Washington, D.C. is one of the areas we're interested in settling down. And I thought for sure with our background, I'd be at the Department of Defense, at the Pentagon or the State Department.
Yeah.
I had a law degree, so I thought maybe the Justice Department. So I had some opportunities and offers there. But there was this one woman I bumped into who was asking for people's resumes, and she was with the Department of Labor for OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is part of the Department of Labor. And the only thing I really knew about OSHA at that time was I'm a first generation American. So my dad is from the Ukraine originally, and he had spent 35 years working in an injection molding factory. So all I knew about OSHA were the stories, OSHA came in and, did this
Right.
stuff to our machinery and all that kind of stuff. So I went and did my interviews and stuff, and we were a little older. We had finished our military service, and I had just finished a bunch of school. I was in my early 30s. So the interviews I went to, the Department of Defense, the Justice Department, and the State Department wanted to send me to another 1 to 2 years of schooling. Like at DOD, they wanted to go, like into purchasing and things like contracting and things like that. I
Right.
went to the Department of Labor, OSHA, and they said, we have no money, we have no resources, and we need you to start working the first day you show up. We're going to throw you into the deep end of the pool. And I said, all right, sign us up. We're ready to
Yeah.
go. So it was really the need, that they wanted somebody right away and get going and so forth. And the neat part about it was the other thing that interested me. This was the time period when Vice President Al Gore had this reinventing government effort going on in the 1990s. They were trying to redo the federal government, make it more customer friendly and stuff. And that's the group that I joined at OSHA in
Okay.
1996. So it was really the fact that they needed somebody and they were going to throw us into the deep end of the pool. And that's kind of what I was looking for at that stage of the career.
I think it's a common perspective we all had. Just let us jump into the middle of a problem, and so
Exactly.
that got you
Exactly.
going.
Yeah. Take the harder road, right? Don't
Yeah.
take the easy one.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you're from New Jersey originally. Talk a little bit about where you were from in New Jersey, and
Yeah.
there's lots of jokes about which exit and all the rest. But
Sure. Well,
where'd
yeah,
you come
thank
from?
you. I'll start off with that. Exit 157 off the Garden State Parkway, Garfield, New Jersey. So you're spot on with that one. I grew up about 10, 12 miles outside of New York City in Bergen County, New Jersey. Like I said, my dad had come over in 1957 from the Ukraine. He emigrated over and, came into New York Harbor, and they put him on a bus a couple of weeks later and shipped him down to Garfield, New Jersey. And that's how he kind of ended up there.
Huh.
My mom was actually born in the U.S., but her family was from Slovakia when it was Czechoslovakia, and then it split off into two countries. So Slovakia was where she, from 3 months until she was 17, which is where her family was. That's where she grew up. And it was a tough time for them. They both grew up. They were born in 1930 and they grew up during World War II.
Hmm.
So my mother came over right after the end of World War II in 1947. They gave her a choice. She had to either give up her Slovak citizenship or her U.S. citizenship. Thank goodness for me, they made the right decision and decided to come to the U.S. So my parents met in that area, and like I said, they worked in the textile industry originally. That area was known for textiles and stuff. Now we ship everything overseas, but they did that in this area of New Jersey.
Yeah.
And then my dad found this job in this factory, and that's where we grew up. It was a small immigrant community. Most of the families were from Eastern Europe, Italy, that kind of area. It was a great place to grow up. We used to go out to the beach out in Long Island at Jones
Yeah.
Beach and stuff. So it was a great area. We enjoyed it.
And what got you interested in the military?
So, my father was just growing up. My father thought the greatest guy, like he thought they were gods, when he would talk about guys like MacArthur and Patton and Eisenhower, those kind of guys. They just had a reverence for them as far as wanting to, like appreciating what they did for the world and stuff. So I always had
Hmm.
that, sort of background stuff. Then one time, I think I was maybe 11, 12 years old. My church had a trip up to West Point for a
Yeah.
Army football game,
Okay.
and man, it was a cold, rainy day. They played University of Pittsburgh. Army got trounced. A young guy named Tony Dorsett ran for over 200 yards at the football game and stuff. So, but I was just so amazed on how the cadets, like throughout the rain, like it didn't bother them, didn't affect them, didn't impact them. They just cheered for their team and stuff.
Right.
And that kind of started it for me to get it going. And then the other thing was being a first generation American. My parents had never gotten beyond an eighth grade education. So just trying to find ways to also help pay for, I had a younger sister who was 5 years younger. So just trying to find some ways. So I got interested in ROTC and the academies and stuff.
Hmm.
But West Point it was just a special place. So I would say probably my sophomore year in high school is when it started. And I don't know if you remember this, but when we were at that age, there was this one poster that West Point had, and it said something to the effect of, the history we teach was made by the people we taught, or something to
One
that
of the most
effect. Remember
brilliant
that one?
posters ever. I think
Yeah,
the percentage of people who say that one poster caught their eye is
yeah, yeah.
extremely high, right?
Still
Yeah.
is. Still, I mean, today a little bit about having Robert E. Lee on it. We could have a separate discussion on that.
Well,
So, but had Eisenhower and Grant on it and stuff, and that really started it. And then the other funny thing was my school. Most of the kids were not going to college from my high school, so just working with our the administrative staff to try to figure out how to do the application and stuff. It was phenomenal. But my junior year, I had half of our high school administrative staff trying to help figure out how to do the application and all that kind of stuff for West Point. So it was kind of a fun activity. Yeah.
right. Yeah, the committee going. And what did you do? Were you an athlete, an academician? What was your specialty that
Yeah,
got you
so
noticed?
I was a jack of all trades. I wanted to come and play. I didn't get recruited or anything like that. It was really academics, coming out of high school, and I think it was just the roundedness of how they expected us to be a student, an athlete, and have some military background.
Yeah.
I wasn't an Eagle Scout. I made it up to Webelos, and then our pack disbanded from the church and stuff. But I enjoyed all that stuff, and to me, the one of the factors was, growing up in an immigrant household, like just the daily discipline of getting up and making your bed and all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So, I joked around after living with my mom and dad, like going to West Point wasn't so bad as a plebe year, like making the beds and all that kind of stuff. So I like that component, but it was sort of being able to accelerate, at all the components. I tried to walk on to the basketball team, had a
Yeah.
little bit, was going to look like I might have made the JV team, but then I injured my back. So I was out for a while. And then they let me be. I was the manager for the Army men's team, our plebe and yearling years.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Good for you. Well, there's a lot of our classmates who went into the infantry as you did, who cite the Webelos as a great great training ground for
There
that.
you go. Yeah.
So basketball player. So played basketball in high school.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were, we had a decent team. I was honorable mention all conference my
Yeah,
senior year. We didn't have any height, but we had a lot of heart and stuff. We
yeah.
competed, in the local class. We didn't win any tournaments or didn't win any state championships or anything like that, but we weren't too bad.
And then, so how did you find? So coming from a strict household, sounds like. How did you find our day and Beast and all the rest? Was it?
Yeah, that part wasn't, the adjustment to the military component, the not speak, it's funny. I grew up, again, my parents were both from Eastern Europe. So I grew up in an Eastern Orthodox household, which, sort of, when I was growing up, we looked at Roman Catholics as liberals and stuff. It was a fairly conservative environment. And the church services were 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long. So it was perfect because, in our church, everything was regimented. You sat in the same pew. We sat in the same pew that my mother had sat in since 1947 when she first came, over
Really?
to America and stuff. And the spot that I had, our church had these 4 huge pillars in the middle of the church. And my position was standing behind one of the pillars. So every Sunday up until I was 18 years old, standing behind there and listening to the church service and stuff and not being able to see anything. So that part was pretty easy. I'll tell you, here's a funny one for you, Paul. The most challenging thing for me was I had never dealt with weapons before, never fired a weapon or anything before. And my recollection was, I think I was one of the last 5 or 6 in my group when we were doing minimum qualifications with the M16 and stuff, just to get the hang of it. So it was probably working with the weapon systems was the biggest adjustment. And then academics too. Like, it was funny, like, it's funny now, it wasn't funny then, but I remember showing up and, we did chemistry, right? And the first couple days, they were doing a review of chemistry. When after day 1, everything that they were doing in review was new material for me in chemistry. So,
Right.
making that adjustment and stuff. So it took a couple semesters before making the dean's list and stuff. So academics was the other place that was a big adjustment for me.
And you were a plebe in E1.
That's
So,
right.
which
Go one, damn it. Yeah.
there you go. Had a great crew over there. I was looking at some of the names
Yeah.
from that crew. What was it like in E1? I've heard stories.
Yeah, love it. So we were the old MacArthur Barracks. We were in my plebe year. We were in that corner of MacArthur Barracks on the top floor, 4th floor. And so to go to the bathroom, you had to go down the 4th floors and into the basement to try to go. So lots of times, just going to the bathroom, you had to get through that gauntlet of the upperclassmen. Going down the 4 flights of stairs. But
Right.
they were supportive. Had some great classmates, some folks who were very successful. Steve Cannon was my roommate, who went on, had a great career. You're not only at West Point, but then in the private sector.
Yeah.
Mark Thompson, who was ended up being a general, was my roommate. And it was funny because these guys were accelerating in academics from day 1, and I was struggling. I was like, wow, maybe I'm not in the right place here with those two, the way those two guys,
Right.
Mark ended up being a
Right.
star man in our class. So we had, those are some of the, the other semester, my roommate was Bill Lampley and Terrence Green. Both
Yeah.
were on the football team.
Right.
And so they were great guys. So that was a whole different thing where those guys would come back and by 8:30, they'd be in bed. So, at night I'd be studying with the flashlights and stuff to try to,
For very different reasons than your first semester
yeah,
roommates, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. But they were great
first
guys.
semester roommates because their homework was done. The second
Yeah,
semester because they needed the rest.
it's right. That's right. But they were great guys, and it was very enjoyable to get to know them and stuff.
And then you rotated to A3. I think you're the first person from A3 we've had on the podcast, which is great. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, we had it was a pretty tight knit group. We had Donnie Smith, who was one of the offensive linemen for our football team and an All American. Had a great team. We had one of the guys, Bill Schiffer, was my roommate, who was ended up being the captain of the lacrosse team from Long Island and stuff. Was my roommate one time. I then had a fellow New Jersey, Rich Minicozy,
Yeah.
who's now done stuff with Hotel Thayer and stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
now in time. So it was a great crew. My roommate for a couple of the semesters was also a guy named Rich Carter, who was originally from the Spartanburg, South Carolina area. So we were our first year. He was the company commander, and I was the XO one semester. But it was a good group. Rusty Biddle was someone else we still stay in touch with. I just had some communications with Dave Thielen, who was in our class. We had one classmate who was with us, who started out and was on the wrestling team, a guy named Ken Carrick. But for the dean got him, after along the way and stuff. But we still stay in touch with him. He was having some medical issues recently, and it was nice to see the A3 classmates got together and tried to support him a little bit financially and some other ways. So it's, we still stay in touch mostly through email and stuff. We haven't met too many times, but it's been a good crew. It was a good crew.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here because the A3 groups, it's great to have somebody visible and able to reach out to those folks. They're a little quieter group.
Yep.
We have some noisier companies out there, but I was in I3, so all part of the Third Reg family. So it's great to have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what kept you busy in terms of interest? We all had a little something that kept us from going stir crazy there at the academy. Were you?
Yeah. So the big things for me were the basketball took up, doing some of that stuff, but did the debate team, so enjoyed that a little bit.
Debate team.
Yeah. So that was kind of that was an exciting time period, and then also got involved a little bit in the Russian club. It was funny. I came, our plebe year. The language I took was Russian, and my father, we spoke different dialects. My father spoke Ukrainian, which is a variation from Russian and stuff. And it was funny. Plebe year, one of my first classes we had with Russian. We had this Professor Solo, and he was right out of the Politburo. He was a defector from the Soviet Union and wore these black rimmed glasses and stuff, and had the short hair and everything.
Excellent.
So he picked me to read in the first class. He asked me to read the first few sentences of something that we were supposed to have practiced and stuff. And I got out like 3 sentences, and he stopped me and he said, "What part of the Ukraine is your father from?" So I guess my dialect, speaking with the dialect and stuff. So
he knew. That's so interesting.
Yeah. So I was involved with that for a little bit and stuff.
And is that what you majored in, or was this just part of your interest?
No, well, no, it's not what I made. I ended up majoring in political science and stuff.
You did?
Yeah.
Talk about that. What was it? So each of the areas of concentration, or I guess majors, was a smaller part of what we did. But what were the types of things you all worked on? And did you major in it, or just had it as a concentration?
No, it was a major. It was a major. It ended up being my major. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Both the American studies and the international relations. The social sciences was the part that I enjoyed, particularly our cow in first year. Got to write as a firstie. Got to write the paper. And went before a couple of the officers, as far as like would have a board and stuff for you to present your senior thesis and stuff.
Yeah.
We had a great, I think it was, gosh, I'm forgetting the major's name. We had a professor who took, like, what they did is our cow year, they brought all the people that were majoring in political science together and took us on a trip to Washington, D.C., to try to get some primary research done for our papers. So it was about 12 of us or so. It was a fascinating trip. He got us into the White House, and we had time to interview Vice President Bush at that time. Bush 41 ended up being our president, 41.
Yeah, look at you.
He did an interview with us. Don Regan, who was the chief of staff, I think, at the time. So there were several people from the White House that we got to interview, and it was kind of neat. I think they were excited to see the cadets with the gray uniforms, and
Sure.
we were ecstatic to have some firsthand information that we could include in our papers. So
Yeah.
it was a facet challenging. Back then we were using electric typewriters and erasable bond paper, as we were writing our
Those were the good
papers.
days.
Oh man, like erasing half a page and then typing
Right.
back onto that page.
And
Those
your
were.
ability to erase was like a critical skill to get
Oh,
through those
yeah.
papers, right?
Yeah, I tell those stories. We have a daughter who's 25, and tell her those stories. And we might as well be talking about the Revolutionary War period. When you're
Yeah.
talking about that kind of stuff.
And what got you interested in political science? Was it a class or an instructor, a P?
It was the classes. I enjoyed history. I had a couple teachers in high school that and my seventh and eighth grade history teacher got me into the history. One time he gave me this book about Appomattox. So I was reading, the interaction between Lee and Grant at the end of the Civil War and stuff, and then because my parents, their life was impacted so greatly by World War II,
Sure.
so I always had that interest in it and stuff. I thought originally because I was into the math, I enjoyed the math stuff, but once we got done with calculus and all that other stuff, it got a little too theoretical for me and stuff. So then I kind of switched over to the social sciences and just found that the ability to write and express, I enjoyed that component. And then it was sort of the pathway for me afterwards, because subsequently when I was on active duty, I started preparing to be a foreign area officer.
You
So
did. Okay.
I pursued a master's degree in international relations. They had a program in Germany from Boston University, so started the
Yeah.
program there. So that was a good continuation. So I enjoyed the bringing together of U.S. Political science and international relations was fascinating for me.
Good for you. And then infantry was your chosen branch.
Yep.
What? How did that emerge? Was that something you were set on early on, or was it?
Yeah, so kind of went through the whole gamut. When I started, I was going to be infantry, and was ready to do that and enjoyed it. And then had a couple classmates, Mike O'Day and Billy Schiffer, who were classmates, were talking about air defense artillery. Like that's the future. More into the missile defense and all that kind of stuff. So I started leaning toward that sort of yearling and cow year. But then when we went and trained the upcoming, the rising yearlings out at Buckner, when we were the guys running the training for the yearlings and stuff out there, I got to be a platoon leader, and just fell in love with it. Loved the working with the soldiers, so with the cadets and stuff, and training them and that camaraderie and stuff. So it kind of brought me full circle. Started off leaning toward infantry, and then was thinking about air defense artillery. But then I was like, yeah, I'd like to. This is. I think it's where my strength is in working with people and working with teams and trying to build people and mentor people and stuff. So, and it was the right decision for me. So.
You mentioned the dean's list earlier on. So academically, if you went infantry, you were able to pick kind of where you were decided to go. It sounds like you ended up in Germany. What was the thinking there?
Yeah, so like to me, I got fascinated by again World War II, being impacted by my parents. I was fascinated learning about the Berlin Brigade, which we didn't know was the end of the Cold War, but it was still the Cold War when we were coming out and graduating, and it just fascinated me to go to to West Berlin, to think about being several hundred kilometers inside communist East Germany at the time.
Yeah.
So being stationed in West Berlin, you had the Berlin Wall there, you had the Soviets on the other side, you were surrounded by the East Germans, and you're a couple hundred kilometers from West Germany. So I guess it was sort of like like just a fascinating, to me it was a serious assignment where you still had we patrolled the wall, and the Warsaw Pact was there and stuff. So that's what fascinated me, and I enjoyed going there. My parents were a little hesitant about going there because they spent their lives trying to get away from the communist threat,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was just something I wanted to try.
So what was the? I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you ended up at the Berlin Brigade.
Yeah.
What what was the understanding of the mission from the ground's eye view? Like when you showed up there, they said we're here for like what would because you were in the middle of
Yeah.
communist country there, right? What was the mission?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was basically it was to show that basically the message was to tell the Soviet, don't you're not going any further. Don't
Right.
try. Don't come across. We are going to defend this, and we were kind of an out. I mean, West Berlin was an outpost. I mean, we were a small. We had 3 battalions of the 502nd Infantry Regiment there. And we were in one sector. You had the French had some military in another sector, and the British were in another sector. And I mean, if at that time, if the Soviet Union was going to go ahead and invade Western Europe, we always joked about they would put a big old POW sign around West Berlin and just kind of bypass us and stuff. But it was still fascinating to be there. There was you know, all kind of intelligence stuff happening, and espionage type stuff that every once in a while you got involved in a little bit on the periphery. We didn't do that any kind of mainstream stuff, but it was just neat to be there to show the flag. One of the jobs I had, I was a reconnaissance platoon leader for a while, and we actually patrolled the Berlin Wall. So that was fascinating. Looking through the binoculars and the
Yeah, yeah.
young Soviet soldiers pointing their weapon at you and stuff. You just wondered what was going through their minds. So for me, it was sort of like living a little bit of what I've heard about from my parents as I was growing up, like what it was like and stuff. So it was fascinating. And West Berlin was a beautiful. I think it's one of the 5 best cities. Well, now it's Berlin,
Uh-huh.
unified Berlin, but I think it's one of the 5 best cities in Europe. Having lived there for 4.5 years, just a great city. If you're ever, I don't know if you've been there, but if you're ever
I
doing a
have.
trip
Yeah.
through Europe, it's a great city.
It was one of my favorite cities to visit for business because when I had a little bit of time, there was
Yeah,
so much history there that
yeah.
I spent a fair bit of time looking around. Yeah, it's an intriguing area, and at the time when you were there, I mean, that was where the action was.
Yeah, yeah. I used to joke when I was in the government and in the private sector. If you want a good example of an outcome measure, we got there in 1987, and the wall was there. When I left in '92, it was gone. So
There you go,
had the ultimate outcome measure there.
and it's right here on my resume.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got out after 5. It looks like from
Yeah.
your resume. What was the thinking there? It sounds like you had a great tour there, but
Yeah.
coming
Yeah. I
back.
had I had a good. The one thing, like just I really enjoyed it, but it did take a toll. I mean, as an infantry
Sure.
guy, we were gone 250 days out of the year, deployed. The soldiers that I had, the young soldiers that I had that had wives, young families and so forth, a lot of stuff was kind of tough. And we're deployed because every place we trained, we had a small training area in West Berlin, but most of the time we had to deploy to other parts of West Germany and other parts of Europe, Italy, and
Right.
so forth.
For the
So it was just a
reinforcements. Yeah,
tough,
yeah.
yeah, it's a tough lifestyle. When I got, to that age, I started thinking a little bit, because up until then, your family is your platoon. That's who you're
Right.
worried about. That's who you're focused on. But I started thinking about, maybe wanting to settle down in a couple years, and I didn't know that I was gonna. It takes a special person, for those who have continued to serve and their spouses. It takes a special person to be the spouse of a military person and travel and so forth. And I hadn't met anybody at that point, and I didn't know that I was going to find or whether I was going to do that. So it was really more on a personal note as far as
Mhm.
thinking about wanting to settle down, and so I thought about maybe transferring to another branch or something like that. But the other factor for me was the Gulf War. First Gulf War was breaking out, but it really
Mhm.
wasn't a big factor. I was a Cold War person, and to
Yeah.
me, with the Soviet Union ending and the wall coming down and forces being removed, it just seemed like, okay, my part is done here with the Cold War. So it just seemed like a good time to move on.
Yeah. And what was your original or your initial thoughts getting out? What were you interested in doing?
So I thought about either going to law school or pursuing an MBA. And so just when I got home, just talking to family and friends, and I really had some not family members, but members of my church were attorneys and encouraged me to go to law school and maybe practice law with them and so forth. And the other thing for me was the MBA was just kind of nebulous. I wasn't exactly sure what I'd be focusing on in an MBA. So decided to, start off. I came home and started applying to schools, and then went in the fall of 92, I think it was. I started law school. So that's kind of what made me, pursue that area.
Okay. And so that's for good 4 or 5 years getting that sorted out, right?
Yeah. So when I first got out, I was just about done. One of and another factor for me getting out is like I was scheduled to go to advanced training, and then go to I was going to be either stationed out in California or Hawaii, and then after that they started talking about maybe being a foreign area officer with my background and being familiar with Eastern Europe and so forth. But then when the Cold War ended, the foreign area
Yeah.
focusing on that area. So I had just about completed everything with the master's in international relations from Boston University. So I got out and went up to Boston for a few weeks and finished up the master's, had to sit for the exams and so forth, and got that finished. And then the following fall, I started law school.
Okay, man. Because you were studying while you were an officer in
Yes,
getting
yeah.
that basic
The
background for the
program,
master.
yeah, the program was fascinating. The fortunate part that I had was, so I was a platoon leader, and then in between, I had a chance to be an exchange officer with the British, and
You
then
did.
was a scout platoon leader, and then I was the executive officer of the brigade headquarters company. And
Oh
that
boy.
was like,
Yeah.
a lot of administrative,
Lots of
ceremonial type
administrative.
stuff. So I had time in the evenings. It wasn't 24/7,
What did
so
a
that,
liaison officer with the British do? Because it's
oh,
not something we all
I'll
know.
tell you, that was a fascinating time period. So the British at that time it was the Black Watch.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this beforehand, but they reminded me every day when I was with them. This was the unit that came over in 1812 and burned down the White House.
Right. That
Yeah,
came up.
so
That came up a few times.
they would mention that if you they would it was fun during in their officers mess. They would joke around. They would pull up sort of some kind of a mug and that was made out of some metal and stuff, and said, this mug is older than the United States is. We've had it in our unit. But they were a great bunch. They were fascinating. They were Scottish,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they were a great bunch. But basically, what we were doing was to try to build rapport and relations. So I was actually assigned there. They call them platoon commanders. So I
Hmm.
actually was assigned to the 7th platoon of the British Black Watch Regiment in Berlin. They had about their platoons had about 27 men in it, so it was about a 27-man organization.
Yeah.
And we did same kind of training in Berlin. We focused on what was called military operations in urban terrain, MOUT,
Yeah.
MOUT,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they were doing the same thing. So did that training.
So you acted as a platoon leader
Yeah,
inside the British organization as a
yeah.
liaison, and I imagine they sent one
They did.
lieutenant
Yes,
back
he took
across.
my platoon. Yes,
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
was in the 4th Battalion of the 502nd Infantry in Alpha Company. So that my counterpart took over my platoon, and then I took his platoon in the British military for those few months. Yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
exactly what happened.
that's
And again, we went out and did the training and stuff.
yeah.
I was really excited at the end of it. Their next assignment was to go to. They were going to go deal with the Northern Ireland situation.
Yeah.
So I actually started training with them and was hoping I'd maybe get an opportunity to go. But once word got up, to brigade headquarters, they're like, we're not sending any Americans into Northern
I
Ireland
think
and stuff.
that
So
was
that was,
probably for the best, Bob.
yeah, yeah, the last thing we wanted.
Right.
But the highlight of that time was every British regiment has a royal as the honorary colonel.
Right.
And the Black Watches was Queen Elizabeth's mother.
Huh.
They called her the Queen Mother.
Queen Mother. Yeah.
And yes, and she actually visited during the time period I was there. So it was fascinating to have. I mean, wow, I mean, you could imagine when a unit is being visited by the President of the United States. Well,
Yeah.
it's that times 2 or 3. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
everything was spick and span. Very lovely lady, very gracious. These guys would do anything for her,
Yeah.
to honor her and stuff. And it was a very nice visit. She was very charming and asking about, some, American culture things and stuff. So that was a fun
Look
thing.
at that. You met the Queen Mother. Boy,
Yeah.
oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're good at a cocktail party, Bob. Everybody told you that, the stories you got.
Oh yeah, I got it pretty good. And and it was a good. So I started it the first year, and then it was considered successful. So the next year they sent another one, and it was our classmate Mickey Haydak,
Yeah.
who was the representative the second year.
Okay. There
He
you
ended
go.
up coming to 4th Battalion, 502nd Infantry as well. A few months after I started and stuff, and then he ended up going the following year. So we started a little class of '86 trend going there, working
There
with the
you
British.
go.
Yeah,
Well, look at that. Innovators at the very beginning.
that's right. That's right. We were ahead of our time.
So let's fast forward. Your fiance then became your wife. How did you guys come together? Was that at school during law school?
Yeah, that's exactly where we met. We were both originally from New Jersey, and we
Yeah.
met in law school out in Ohio. What they did, it's a small class, and they put you into sections. So we were in the same, just by chance, we were in the same 30-person section, and we had
Mhm.
all of our first year classes together. And whenever we would socialize and stuff, we'd kind of gravitate toward each other because we had the New Jersey thing in common, and
Yeah, yeah.
talking about stuff. And so we became friends and classmates, and we dated through most of law school. And then, we're waiting to see what we were going to do with our careers. I was thinking about staying in Ohio, and I had an opportunity to work at the university's administrative offices, to work with the legal department there. But my wife, well, at that time, fiance or girlfriend, I guess, made it clear that she wasn't staying in Ohio. She didn't want to stay. She wanted to move back, to either New Jersey or
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. and stuff.
Therefore, you weren't staying in Ohio.
Right. And well, that's kind of where I think why we initially weren't, engaged in getting married and stuff. Cause I wasn't sure yet, I think she was sure. I was still open to the idea, but
Yeah.
as you could see, I ended up, she prevailed, and 30 years later continues to prevail.
Another wise outcome.
Yes.
In terms
Smart
of,
move on my part.
a
Yeah.
smart move. That's great. And so you mentioned she ended up with Fannie Mae. So was she on a similar track where she went to those same recruitment events? And so you were both considering.
No, she did not. She came from the IT arena. And then, so we graduate from law school, and she went back to New Jersey and worked for one of the state legal defense funds in the state of New Jersey. I went on to graduate school for a year and stuff. And then we decided during that time period, we got engaged. And that's when we sat down and said, hey, where are we going to try to go? And, Washington, D.C. ended up being one of the areas. So she ended up really focusing more, taking her law. She wasn't a practicing attorney either. She ended up taking her degree and going back into the IT arena mostly. So she got to work for some pretty big companies here in Northern Virginia, including AOL. And then after AOL kind of fell apart and got reduced in size, she ended up getting picked up at Fannie Mae and then worked there for about 17, 18 years of her career. Yeah.
And so when you had a law degree and when you went to work for Department of Labor and OSHA, but you didn't work as a lawyer, you worked in the talk that through. So
yeah. So to be honest with law school was not my cup of tea. We come out of, I was used to, 98% black and white and 2% was gray, and law was, 180 degrees. It's 98% gray and only 2% black and white. Now, many guys, like Mike Pompeo and stuff. They adjust to it fine, but to me, it wasn't my cup of tea. So
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do something else one time. So one time, while I think it was our third year in law school, or maybe second year of law school, uh, someone who ran the public administration program, master's in public administration program, came and talked to the folks in our class and said, combining your law degree with a master's in public administration allows you then to go into federal or state or local government, to get into administration and management and so forth. And I said, well, yeah, it sounds that kind of caught my interest a little bit as
Yeah.
far as going. But again, my girlfriend at the time made me, let it be known, well, you should apply to schools outside of Ohio because I'm not staying in Ohio. So ended up applying to schools closer to the, to the
Right.
Northeast where we were and stuff. And then ended up getting accepted there and studied. It was a 2-year program, but they let me finish it in 1 year. I took some extra classes and took classes over the summer. And it was through there that they introduced me to this U.S. presidential management internship opportunity where they had a competition for people to apply. And because, I was older and had been a company, had worked in the military and already
Yeah.
had another degree and stuff. So, had the opportunity to represent the university in this, to become a finalist in this program and stuff.
So you have 3 degrees. You got the
After West Point, yeah. So after
original
West Point, yeah,
political science degree, then the
Masters in International Relations,
Master in International Relations. Apologies.
yeah,
And
then
JD.
a JD and a law degree, and then a Master's in Public Administration. Yeah.
Well, you are one book smart fella. That's great. Good for you.
Well, and it come a long way from not knowing all the stuff in chemistry review
Right.
is plebes.
From all the way back to that chemistry review, you said
Man,
never again.
If nothing else, I learned that was one thing at West Point is knowing how to study, learn, prepare at the rigorous academic levels. One of our classmates who was an A3 guy, Mike O'Day, he was the best, man. Just watching him, how he studied and going over all those old written partial reviews and stuff. He was great at it, and just learning from those guys on how to study just made life easier with all those other degrees.
Now, what were your so once in OSHA, were you setting policy or looking at compliance? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of us who've had who've seen what you have seen. Talk us through what life was like working for OSHA when they threw you right in the deep end.
Yeah. So it started off in what they had was this reinvention office project. So federal OSHA had about 100 or so offices across the country, and what they were trying to do was move federal regulations. The theory was, don't just be a reactive, giving of tickets. You hand out a ticket after an event. So OSHA is responsible for workplace safety and health, right? They're focused on the workers at work sites. So what OSHA would do is someone would get injured, OSHA would come out, take a look at the situation, and issue a monetary penalty to the company. Well, this time period, they were saying, hey, wouldn't it be great, if we could proactively get out ahead of time and actually help companies prevent the injuries as opposed to, giving a ticket afterwards. And that's what really the focus was. So my first year there, I got to travel to about 40 or 50 offices, a bunch of the regional offices, really got to know the company business. And we were basically restructuring the offices. We were trying to, instead of just being all reactive, we put together a proactive team who was data driven, trying to set up, how the company would work. We tried introducing different strategies, introduced performance metrics. And then the most bizarre thing that drove a lot of the folks nuts was, this is federal taxpayer dollars that are being used here. We should also provide some customer service to that. We shouldn't just hammer the companies with citations and penalties. We should actually provide some customer service to them. And the focus there was small businesses. Big companies could afford to have safety departments and figure this stuff out. Mm-hmm. But how do you do it for the small business? How do you help them? A simple example is there's a federal law that says you have to have this OSHA poster in your facility that tells individuals what their rights are, as far as
That's right.
OSHA, right?
I myself
So,
have had to hang at that poster at a few of my facilities.
well, there you go. So here's one thing that we did
If I'd
in
known
my.
you were behind it, I'd have given you a call.
Yes, you could have, and we wouldn't have charged you. We'd have given you a free one because your taxpayer dollars would have given
Right?
you a free one. But what we tried to say is, instead of going out to a company and they don't have the poster and issuing them a couple $100 fine, how
Yeah.
about giving them a copy of the poster and telling them to post it? And that was sort of the trend that we tried to do, and that's what was happening under this Vice President Gore reinventing government effort. So
Bob,
that's
what
what
you're talking about is changing a culture inside a very large government organization. What were some
absolutely.
techniques you guys used to try to get that done?
So sitting down. So first of all, one of the things that helped tremendously at that time, Congress passed something called the Government Performance and Results Act, GIPRA, at this time period, and that forced all of the agencies, particularly the regulatory agencies, to not just do their jobs every day, but to establish key performance metrics and determine like what is it that so like if you're OSHA, you don't just issue tickets. How do you show us that you're reducing injury, illness across the country or in certain sectors of companies?
Right.
That was sort of the genesis that got it going. Another effort that was not able, they weren't able to get a law put in place, but there was this plain language effort in the federal government in the mid 90s. Stuff had gotten so complicated that you needed lawyers to interpret things and stuff. And it shouldn't be, right? For the average business person, it should be something in plain language. They should be able to understand what they have to do to comply with federal rules and regulations. So trying to rewrite all of this complicated legislation and rules and regulations into simple language that people could understand. So that was another part of the effort of it going. Some of it stuck, like everything else, probably 20 to 30% stuck nationwide. Another 10 to 15% made it to some federal agencies. And then, of course, unfortunately, in the federal government, probably another 20 to 33% just ignored it, just waited till the next administration changed and so forth. So it was, those were kind of the efforts. But so that was the first position. And then from there, when that effort stopped, every time there was a change of administration for a year, I was I got picked up by the Human Relations Department and was the liaison for dealing with the unions because I had a law degree, so they had me interfacing with the unions at the Department of Labor. That was an eye opener. I'd never worked with those before, and then from there, based on my background, I got selected to work in what's called cooperative and state programs at OSHA, and that was really the most fun that I had, in that it was doing these proactive things. How do we work in partnership with businesses? How do we work, putting programs in place that don't punish them, but how do they voluntarily comply with regulations and so forth? So,
it occurs to me, I just seizing on the OSHA poster, I remember looking at that poster and thinking, some of the stuff on there is very obvious to folks like yourself or myself or classmates who went to an academy that taught us leadership, because a lot of it was about communicating.
Yep.
But it wasn't so obvious to a lot of people who own businesses.
Yeah.
You're basically, if somebody's got a problem, they should be able to come and address it, right?
Absolutely. And
no kidding. That's how leadership works. But
exactly. And not with fear of repercussion. How do we, again, it's their taxpayer dollars that are paying for this. We shouldn't just be punishing them. How do we help them proactively?
So I think if we had a bingo card for classmates that have experienced very complex situations, you working for the Department of Labor dealing with unions, I think you got a pretty big slot on that bingo card.
That was it was entertaining doing some Department of Labor renegotiations of the union contracts. Were very entertaining for a couple of years. Yeah.
Was there ever a moment, and I'm not putting you on the spot, where you just sat and just said, "How on earth did I end up here?" We just look around.
Paul, and man, you can say this now, but like, to me, we're not perfect in the military. There's a lot of things that we need to fix, particularly in the Army and in the infantry. But the federal government, at least the part that I experienced from 1996 to 2024, it's really a broken military organization, because there's no, like, people get
Yeah.
promoted in the federal government. For us, right? We finish school, and they still send us the officer basic course right before
Right.
they give us a platoon. Then before they give us a company, they send us to the advanced course, right? Then before they let us play around at the battalion level, they said, and there's so there's training, and then there's consistency of language among the organization. It's different. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
82nd's different than the 101st, and the 325 and all that stuff. But there's some commonality there. In the federal government, there's the range of, you have some people who have never managed anything in their lives and they don't even know the difference between management and leadership.
Yeah.
And then other organizations are a little bit better run. So you just really there were days where I just sat there and said, boy, if there was just some common training here across the board, just to try to get people on the same page. So those were the frustrating. And the other thing was the change of political leadership. Every time you had a change of administration, at first it was sort of a minor swing of the pendulum.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
the time I left in 2024, Paul, it's like the new
Well, you
administration.
really saw it. You really saw the
Yeah.
big change over your career, right?
Yeah, people didn't even think about it. Like, they didn't even see what the previous administration was doing. They just knew they were going to erase all of it right out the gate, and the pendulum is just swinging. And they really aren't, just from the inside baseball, they're really not accomplishing anything. Because then they end up putting back in place a lot of the things that they eliminated because they didn't know what the program was. They didn't really know what the previous administration was
Yeah.
doing.
Right. And any of us have been in any organizational situation know that it's those transitions that are actually really inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
So when you change a thing is when you have to, it's
Exactly.
And then you went 96. So you spent how many years at Department of Labor?
So I was at Labor from 96 to 2019.
Good.
Spent about 17 years at OSHA, and then spent about 7.5 years at the Employment and Training Administration, which is another agency. And there I ran a program called the Job Corps program, which came out of, which was really focused on trying to educate and train young, disadvantaged young people ages 16 to 24. So did that for 7.5 years. And then from there, ended up taking a job at the U.S. Department of Agriculture at the Food and Nutrition Service, and then finished my last 4.5 years there.
So that's amazing. What an amazing run. What a unique path. Congratulations, man. It's just
thanks.
Proof that our classmates have gone to every corner of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are several other. I know there were a number of guys at the Department of Defense that became career senior executives, but there's some others too. I think there's some senior executives that were at Veterans Administration. I think there were a couple at the Justice Department and stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's all that stuff, all the stuff that it's really down to the management and leadership, and working as a team. That to me has been the core success, coming out of our education, and the similarity you have, among all of us.
Now, how about family? Did you talk a little about family?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I said, my wife Donna Harris. We met in law school. We have one daughter. She's 25 now. She was born and raised here in Reston, Virginia. She graduated from Virginia Tech back in 2023.
Okay.
And she went on. She's now in veterinary school. She's at the Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine. She's on the campus at Virginia Tech. She just finished her first year. So she's got 3 more years there, and we're hoping, God willing, she'll be a doctor of veterinary medicine here in a few years.
Yeah, maybe you can lure her down to North Carolina where there's plenty of veterinary work to be done.
We would love to have her there, but she's a little more cold weather, so we'll see.
Let's see. You can't control such things. You can just
That's right.
That's great. Retirement. We can't not talk about retirement. What are your thoughts? You're early stages now, just coming right out of it.
Yeah, I'm a
What
rookie.
are your initial thoughts? Because it's always
Yeah, we
it's a big
well,
journey.
first, yeah, we just feel blessed and fortunate, like that. A lot of folks are kind of dealing with some, the nation and the economy and stuff, but we've just been fortunate with the opportunities that my wife and I had, and so we feel good about that. We're not going to. My wife doesn't fly, so we're not
Okay.
going to be touring the world or anything like that. But I'm looking
Right.
forward to just focusing on sporting events. I'm
Yeah.
a college football and basketball fanatic. So I'm hoping to, since we're down in North Carolina, maybe get up to Raleigh, come down to South Carolina, see the Gamecocks and Clemson and stuff, heading
Yeah.
to some sporting events for football, basketball, and stuff. Looking forward to the 40th reunion. My wife and
Yeah.
I
Looking
are
forward to it.
heading
Yeah.
up there in November. I have family and friends, obviously in New Jersey, so looking forward to the Army Navy game this year, which is up at Giants and
Mhm.
Jets Stadium, the MetLife Stadium up there. But my wife and I are talking about getting back to maybe using our law degrees to do some volunteer work. I'd like to learn a
Yeah.
little bit about the
That's great.
Wilmington, North Carolina area, and see what I could do on the homeless veteran situation. And our other passion is education, being a first generation American, like trying to see what we could do with the local community if they need any assistance in that area. So we're looking to do some volunteer work, maybe some part time consulting, but really just maybe taking the summer and relaxing and decompressing a little bit.
Well, that's a great attitude to have because you'll both relax, but also there's a few tendrils in there that you can pull in terms of future places to volunteer, and there's always very interesting things where you can continue to contribute.
Yep.
And keeping up with classmates is quite a bit of great work being done by classmates still, though
Yep.
it's not a compensated work, but it's still important because it still
Yeah.
contributes. That's great. And when are you wheels up for? I guess you are not wheels up because your wife does not fly. When are you driving down to the Wilmington area?
We'll still have the way she drives it. It feels like it's wheels up. Good one. So May 28th,
All right.
we sold our home up here in Reston. We've been living in a townhouse for a while. We move on May 28th of this one. We were waiting for our daughter to finish up her first year. So now we're here at this townhouse rental, and May 28th, we pack up and the movers take us down to Wilmington, North Carolina. So we're looking
And
forward to
as
it.
of the time of this filming, that's a week from now. So
Yes.
you're having a very busy time, and we're grateful you've been able to carve a few minutes out. Is there anything we have not covered that would be fun for classmates to hear?
No, no, just proud to be part of the classmate West Point. Anybody who lives in the Washington D.C. area and they're looking the West Point Society of D.C. Great group, very very active. Everything from 4-star generals to recent grads and stuff. It's a very active group, very busy. I've been an advisor at large on the group here, so I'll miss that group, but anybody who's in the DC area should definitely look to hook up with the DC Society. They're a great group of guys.
It is a tremendous group. It is a tremendous group. And now the Wilmington Area Society is going to get a great new member. You're just up the road from us here. So there is no question that we're going to run into you
Yep,
as you and your wife come down here. So exciting time.
absolutely. Look forward to it.
Bob, thanks so much for coming on. It was great catching up.
Ditto. Again, thanks for doing this, Paul. It's really great. Thank you for doing it, man.
My pleasure. All right.
All righty.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.